You're watching or listening to Strangers in Space, and there's only two of us here, so this might be 15 minutes, although it's me and Matt, so it could be 30. We're going to be talking about the trailer and the latest news, so you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
I am Matt.
That volume's gone through the roof again. Weird things are happening with the settings at the moment. Just have to put it down there like that. Weird things. Skype is constantly refiguring itself, which is a great way to start the episode, right? But it's bumped us up as I press the record video switch, so that's why it's happened.
How strange.
Before we talk about the trailer, one thing that we mentioned, and that I've mentioned, that you mentioned, and I've repeated, I guess, was the idea of Kate Herron and or Bryony Redman as well, getting the sort of post Russell T Davies showrunnership, because of the fact that he's had them in to write an episode in this first series. But we've also just learned that or Kate Herron at least, is making a movie now with Thingamajig from Barbie, whose name's gone right out of my... No,
Margot Robbie.
Margot Robbie. Okay. And so clearly that means that she's not free. I suppose Bryony Redman's still free, but Kate Herron's not free to do the post RTD thing. So what that means for the future going forward, who can say? Because the other thing, before we get to the trailer, so Kate Herron, not showrunner on Doctor Who, disappointing. Were you expecting it, or was that just a sort of...
I still don't think it necessarily rules it all out. So, I mean, the timings might be different. I think the question always is, if you've been offered a Hollywood movie, would you go to Doctor Who to be a showrunner? You'd only
Stephen
do that
Moffat
if you were
did,
Moffat. Yeah. But Stephen Moffat is a special case, I think.
But Kate Herron, I believe, is down for writing and directing this thing. So that's 3 years. So that is, she's not coming. If there was any talk of her coming to Doctor Who, that's not going to be happening for 3 years beyond, the second series. So that wouldn't be until 6 series in the future. So that's just not happening as things stand, I don't think. But that puts the cat among the pigeons in terms of the idea, because the idea that Dylan and I were throwing around, and Dylan couldn't make this because he's off out on the lash, the bastard.
During the day?
Whatever. I mean, if you're young and you've got friends, it just seems wrong to me.
I mean, most of our fellow podcasters at the moment seem to be borderline alcoholics.
or just busy.
Or just busy, yeah. But I prefer to think of it as a problem for them.
Anyway, Dylan's sort of, and this goes along with what I've always thought from the start. Do you remember right back at the start, I said I thought RTD might do a year, sort of like on the ground on the program, and then step back and let somebody else step up. Well, he's done 2 years, 2 years of writing and now 2 years of production straight off the bat. But Dylan thought that maybe he'd step back after that. And of course, that goes along with what I thought, but just a year later than I thought it would happen. But if there's no indication of who could follow, then that suggests that maybe RTD isn't going to step back. We don't know yet, because it hasn't gone into production yet, as far as we know. There were talk that the spin-off, the Sea Devils thing, the war between the land and the sea, was going to go into production at the start of March, but I don't think there's been any indication that it has yet. So maybe that's been put back a bit. But I think the suspicion is that Russell T Davies has written at least the first, if not more, of that too. So it looks to me like there's more Russell T Davies than any of us thought, and less indication of anybody else taking over than any of us thought. Because the other thing is, there was a tweet that got deleted soon after, but it was from one of these people who follows the production and stuff. I don't know whether it was an insider knowledge thing or whether it was just somebody who's been following various Twitter accounts that follow the production and was sort of adding things up and coming to a conclusion. But after the Moffat announcement this week, this person, whoever it was, tweeted that they thought there were still 2 writers left to announce. on the first series, which would mean that you have 4 episodes from Russell T Davies and 4 episodes from other people. And I think Russell T Davies is already confirmed, or as near as damn it can be confirmed, for episodes 1, 4, 7, and 8, which kind of means that the other writers would be 3, Stephen Moffat.
Yeah.
I think 5 is the one that people reckon to be the Kate Herron, Bryony Redmond one. So 6 would be a guest writer. And that means also then, presumably, that 2 would be a guest writer as well. So these 2 episodes that we're due to get on May the 11th, the first one presumably would be a Russell T Davies, but the Beatles one might not necessarily be. And I made a joke, and it was a joke, and I wasn't really being serious, but it's, I think, a nice idea. That wouldn't it be great if the first 3 episodes of this first series for Shuji Gatwa were Russell T Davies, Chris Chibnall, and Stephen Moffat, i.e. the 3 showrunners, one after another, which would probably be the only time in the programme's history that you could get something like that.
Yeah.
But Chris Chibnall, being a big Beatles fan, it kind of would fit that he would have written the Beatles episode. And Russell T Davies put out a notice on his Instagram that he spoke to Chris Chibnall before he'd even spoken to Stephen Moffat. The implication being either it wasn't about writing an episode, or it was, but Chris Chibnall was too busy, more likely the latter. But he didn't actually say that Chris Chibnall wasn't writing an episode, just that he was too busy to write one, which is basically what Stephen Moffat's been saying for the last year to sort of throw people off the scent of the fact that he might have written one. Well, now we know he's written 2, if not more, 2 for this year, which I'll come back to in a second. I seem to be doing an awful lot of talking, Matt. Do you want to throw in some sort of reaction to some of the things I've said? I don't think Chris Chibnall will be, but it's certainly not beyond the realms of possibility, I don't think.
It's not beyond the realms of possibility. I think RTD said he was busy writing his book. So, you know, that doesn't really mean anything. Feels unlikely just because it's so close to. I mean, I'd imagine Chibnall would want nothing more to do with Doctor Who for a good while. But at the same time, Instagram's full of him meeting up with Moffat and RTD. Yeah. So he's been sort of still kind of, it's still been in his life since he finished. And it's been a while since he finished.
But and I will say the one caveat to the fact that he's just finished, as it were, is if Russell T Davies says, do you know, I'm doing an episode about the Beatles and I need somebody to write it. And if you're like a big aficionado, that might be the one thing that makes you sit up and go, oh, actually, I really could see myself doing that.
The one thing that doesn't quite feel right is what we know about the episode. So we know the episode has a very camp villain and its treatment of history is very kind of genre-based rather than authentic feeling. And that doesn't feel like a Chibnall thing anymore. Chibnall, who spearheaded Rosa and Demons of the Punjab and even the Witchfinders, with a bit of that, but
then again, this is the guy who did Dinosaurs on a Spaceship. So I mean, if you sort of, and this is the thing, isn't it? Stephen Moffat in a sort of post Chris Chibnall, post Moffat showrunnership, back to RTD world, kind of gives you the impression that, or leads you to imagine that this could be Moffat unbound. Well, same goes for Chris Chibnall. You say to Chris Chibnall, look, we want to do a Beatles episode, but we want it to be Campus Christmas. You did Dinosaurs on a Spaceship. Just do the same thing, but with the Beatles. It's not beyond
the realms of possibility. I can't help thinking that Dinosaurs on a Spaceship was Moffat unbound and encouraging Chibnall along. So whether that's, maybe. I mean, you know, it's possible. Yeah, I would be disappointed, to be honest, because I'm quite interested to see other writers now. Yeah. Not necessarily the old writers, but no. I would fully expect RTD to. I'm surprised he hasn't brought back whoever back from like Rob Sherman and, well, maybe not Rob Sherman, but
you really want new writers as well, don't you? Kate Herron and Bryony Redmond, right? You want to see. But then again, I suppose it's all about striking a balance, isn't it?
But also maybe unknown writers, which might explain why I haven't been announced yet. So Kate Herron is a known writer. You can sell Kate Herron because Kate Herron wrote Loki. You can obviously sell Stephen Moffat. So the other writers or writer, maybe they are new. Maybe they're sort of, you know, they're being mentored in a way by Russell T Davies. So their announcement isn't so much of a big thing, possibly.
But also, but on the other hand, I also think maybe Russell T Davies is going to people like Kate Herron and Stephen Moffat and whoever else because he wants to get this done as much as possible, as quickly as possible, as painlessly as possible. And this whole Stephen Moffat thing, when he was a showrunner, the first series he did, the first couple of series he did, involved a lot of either untested or untested by Doctor Who writers, and some of those didn't go too well. And also, he had some big name writers, and the big name writers, Richard Curtis and Neil Gaiman, were too busy to do all the necessary rewrites. And as I understand it, Stephen Moffat, in the end, ended up writing a lot of what ended up on the screen from their ideas, from their scripts. But in the end, what ended up on screen, a lot of it was Stephen Moffat, because they're just too busy to sit around doing 15 sort of rewrites to get it ready for the 45-minute Saturday evening slot. Yeah. And what Stephen Moffat eventually ended up doing was basically going to lots of sort of new showrunners, as it were. In other words, people with enough experience that Stephen Moffat could say to them, 45 minutes, these are the sort of boundaries that you need to work within. This is what I need from you. Can you do it? They've got enough experience to be able to do it. And because they're showrunners themselves, they've got that end of the experience too, where they know what the capabilities are. Whereas I think probably the trouble with somebody like Richard Curtis is that sort of 45-minute sort of not prestige but expensive end of television is somewhere in between the two extremes of what he's written. So Blackadder, for instance, is essentially cheap 30-minute television, and then the movies he's made are right at the very other end of the spectrum. In the end, Moffat brought in lots of writers like of the sort of strength of like Neil Cross and writers like that, because those were the writers that he could trust to get on with the job without him having to do lots of rewriting for them, I guess. And so that's a long-winded way of saying I wonder if what Russell T Davies is doing is bringing in as many writers as he can trust to do the job without him having to do the amount of. Do you remember the writer's tale was all about how much rewriting he was having to do on some of the scripts, and how some of the scripts turned out to be pretty much 99% Russell T Davies. I think probably that's what he's trying to avoid this time around.
I think there's definitely a Gatiss-shaped hole in this series, though, because Gatiss is, whatever your preference about him, he's clearly a writer that they can trust, because they both, Moffat and RTD, brought him back year after year after year.
Well, they didn't know that. Moffat did, but Russell T Davies used him twice and then ditched him, if you remember.
Really?
Yeah, he used him in the first and second series and then ditched him. There's no Gatiss after series 2.
Okay.
It was the Idiot's Lantern, remember? That's the last thing he wrote before he came back from Moffat. So I get the impression, I don't know, but I got the impression that Russell T Davies wasn't happy with Idiot's Lantern and so didn't use him again, except as an actor, because everybody likes Mark Gatiss, but maybe Russell T Davies was, I like you, I want to use you, but not as a writer.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but that was the impression I picked up.
I mean, he's had a lot of time to demonstrate his effectiveness after Russell T Davies, though. So, I mean, the number of Doctor Who scripts, he must be 3rd on the list or 4th on the list. He must be up there with the most scripts by a non-showrunner.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And and he's, in terms of ones that you would need to rewrite, presumably he's one that you wouldn't. And we're all begging to see that second half of Sleep No More, aren't we?
I'd be quite happy to see a Gatiss, a nice, clear, clean Gatiss story. A nice historical.
Or not. Well, okay, let's talk about the trailer a bit then. The trailer's come out. I know what Dylan would say. and I sort of agree. My first impression of the trailer was when I first watched it, which was on a computer screen with the sound not up very high, and it was all spinning at you pretty fast, was like, oh wow, this is probably more than I was expecting in some respects. But then watching it back on a television screen, some of the special effects look pretty shonky. And for all that Disney money, I didn't think it looked very good. What were your first impressions? And then we'll dive into some of it.
I've seen it on the television screen. I still think it looks. I've grudgingly accepted that some shots looked pretty good, like the landscape shots.
Some do,
and some of the action shots. And there's, the scene of post-apocalyptic London looked pretty neat, I thought.
But Millie Gibson in the corner looks badly superimposed.
Right.
Those are the things, yeah.
Maybe special effects are the things that they're still, I'd imagine they'll still be working on those up until...
We're pretty close now, though, aren't we?
Yeah, up until
a month or so.
So possibly it'll be sort of smoothed over.
But then you wouldn't use the bits that need smoothing over in the trailer, would you?
Well, it depends how finished the other ones. It depends how to the wire they are with the special effects. I mean, but also from what I understand in the industry, the VFX industry is completely run ragged with work. So I mean, it's like, because it's not just Doctor Who. I mean, other series have as many effect shots as Doctor Who, and they aren't necessarily fantasy or sci-fi. They're just set in the past, and suddenly the VFX teams are brought onto it.
Well, so there is, of course, even in Disney, there's a lot of very effects heavy stuff at the moment because there's lots of Marvel and Star Wars series going on.
And the Marvel movies, the special effects are getting worse. If you look at some of the recent Spider-Man movie, it gets away with it because it's so fast-paced and so crowd-pleasing. But there are scenes set in a cafe that are not quite as bad as Terror of the Autons, but you can see that they are a special effects shot, or the outside is a special effects shot. So I think this is the increasing quality of things we watch these things on is outpacing their ability to produce really good special effects really quickly at the last minute. And directors are relying more on special effects. So
what did you think of just in general, I would talk about, because there did seem to be a theme to the trailer, and I wonder if that theme carries across multiple episodes and or the whole series, and if it's the sort of arc of
I saw two themes that may be probably interconnected.
For sure.
I'm willing to admit that I'm starting to wonder if Mavity, if it's not a returning big plot item, might be
an example
of a theme that's recurred that I assume that they'll expand on and create something bigger, which is, changing the butterfly effect, changing history, the dangers of that. Whether that's just in one episode, it's difficult to tell from a trailer whether it's just one episode about this or whether it becomes a kind of a repeated theme throughout the whole thing. But the Beatles suggests that dinosaurs, post-apocalypse. So
it's in.
Sorry, go on.
I can tell you, because one thing you can do is look at the costumes you're wearing.
Yeah.
And so the butterfly effect, the sound of thunder effect, is in at least 2 episodes because they're in completely different costumes. One of which is the Beatles episode. That's definitely a butterfly effect episode.
That's the apocalyptic London shot as well. The Beatles episode is the same as apocalyptic London, yeah? Because they're wearing their 60s.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Bridgerton one potentially is as well. But also from some other things that were in the trailer, it looks like that Sound of Thunder thing might be. Well, it looked like that Sound of Thunder thing might be a recurring theme of the series. I'll tell you why. Because the trailer concentrated a lot on that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it seemed to me that it was juxtaposing that with this is where Millie's come from.
Yeah.
So the body on the steps outside the church.
Yeah, the Harry Potter moment.
Yeah, but if you put the body, the baby, not the body, the baby on the steps outside the church together with the sort of Mavity thing, or Mavity is the word we use, but actually it's the idea that at some point they've changed the future And if you put that together with the Beatles episode and all of that too, I don't know. It could be that it's just a single episode thing, but I think that
Well,
looks like it's going to be the theme of the series, because I think it looks like it's going to relate back to the baby at the church. I think.
the church on Ruby Road had that in it anyway, because the
Yeah,
Doctor
yeah.
goes back in order to change the present. So they had elements of that. So it's clearly going to be a repeated thing. But there's also the rise in supernatural stuff that they talk about in the trailer, which was talked about in Wild Blue Yonder and The Giggle. So that's going to be a theme, whether that's connected with the kind of butterfly effect, changing history stuff.
I think it would be, because I think Russell T Davies, whether you like the way he does it or not, I think he tends to bring those things together. It looks to me like, I don't know whether the because we're expecting the toy maker to return, whether that's this series or next series, because it might be a 2 series arc of some kind. The Mrs. Flood thing, I think, is supposed to not be resolved this year, although I guess it might be. But because the way the toy maker was brought back by, what was it? He did superstitions at the end of the universe or something. Salt at the end of the
He did
universe, wasn't it?
something plotty.
And that was right at the end of the universe, but that brought the toy maker back into the 21st century, which wasn't at the end of the universe. So I wonder if Russell T Davies is bringing because basically the Beatles one looks like it basically repeats the plot to a certain extent of Ruby Road, the Christmas special.
Right.
So that looks like it's got that circular plot thing which Ruby Road had, Church on Ruby Road. I wonder if Russell T Davies is bringing the toy maker, the Church on Ruby Road together. So they were in consecutive episodes that we saw last year. I wonder if he's bringing those two things together as the overarching plot of this year. So the toy maker and a time paradox in the 8th episode.
My completely uninformed guess at the moment would be the toy maker returns as part of this rising superstition weirdness stuff.
Yeah.
But the changing, the time meddling, if you will, that's being seeded through the series and the dangers of changing time will potentially culminate in a really interesting character coming back, which we'll talk about in a future podcast or an earlier podcast about returning characters. And the Time Meddler seems to be the perfect. The Time Meddler is a character that's genuinely worth bringing back, because you can get a character actor comedian in.
Yes.
He's not mad like the Master. He's not malicious or evil like the Rani. He's this kind of mischievous Time Lord. And it would be interesting. It would be, that would work really well. And so they seed this idea of the danger of changing history, not one bit throughout. And then it gradually snowballs, and then, a character like that being behind it.
Yeah, the toy maker talks about using other characters, doesn't he? And Russell T Davies has talked about the toy maker using other characters too. And so that would make a certain kind of sense.
Yeah.
And also, I guess if you've changed time in such a way as the current time and the past have both been altered as well, so that anything from, I guess, prehistory is up for grabs, I suppose that potentially creates a universe where there is more superstition and there is more magic.
Yeah.
Because as we know, magic is just science that's not been defined yet. And so you could potentially say, well, this is a universe in which more of that kind of stuff is happening and we don't know what it is and why. And that goes together with what Russell T Davies said about this is going to be more fantasy than science fiction, in terms of the way Doctor Who leans every now and again. So it could be that
coincidentally, Russell T Davies is injecting more fantasy into the series just as he gets Disney money and Disney special effects, whether they work or not.
And most of them look good. I just thought there were a few bits that the bit where the TARDIS is sliding across the floor in that room, I just thought looked shonky as hell.
I thought that looked all right. I mean, it's they've run out of variations of the TARDIS landing, so that's a nice kind of TARDIS skidding to a halt is quite effective. But apart from that, I can't remember half of I mean, the dinosaur bit, whether the dinosaurs are going to be an entire episode of their own, or whether it's going to be a cold open for a different episode.
I think it.
I can't see them getting an entire episode out of the Doctor and Millie in the Jurassic era.
No, it looks like a cold open for something else.
Yeah.
Presumably the Beatles. Modern name.
Well, a lot of the
Beatles
footage, if we know anything about trailers from the past, it turns out that a lot of the footage tends to be from 3, maybe 4 episodes.
Oh, for sure.
It was. They've managed to mine the 3 or 4 episodes for footage of such a variety that it feels like an entire series, but then you discover actually it's cut scenes from here and bits here. I mean, Moffat was really good at that because his episodes were so kind of sporadic in where they were set.
Yeah, there's a lot of shots in there of Ncuti Gatwa with his haircut from the Beatles episode and of Millie Gibson in the costume from the Beatles episode, which leads me to think the dinosaur bit is that. Or, I don't know, if it was me, I guess, and I was telling a story about time paradox or the butterfly effect, I think you'd start the series with the dinosaur bit, then go to into the space babies storyline, and a bit like in Wild Blue Yonder, where you get that cold open there that doesn't seem that related to the rest of the story. I think you'd start with something like that, and the cold open becomes more and more relevant as the series goes on, rather than as the episode goes on. And actually, that could be what they've done with that cold open in Wild Blue Yonder. Seems to me like that cold open there is definitely for something that's still to come.
Yeah.
It feels like it.
Potentially. For what it's worth, I'm not that excited about the Beatles episode. I'm kind of dreading the bit because they seem to be marketing it. So the poster, and it's only a poster, but they seem to be marketing it as a sort of an Austin Powers type style episode. And for me, that's not that doesn't work with the Beatles in the era that they're showing. It doesn't really fit with what I like about the Beatles in that era. There's something about London in the 1960s that's really cinematic and really kind of, Alfie and that sort of
the knack,
kitchen sink.
Yeah.
Whereas that kind of Austin Powers London feels to me like you used to have in the night, like Austin Powers. So that kind of 90s version of 60s. So in that way, it feels more dated than dated. But it might be brilliant. I'm just,
Do you think it's going to be the musical episode? Do you think there's going to be songs?
Oh, I hope so. I'm
non-diegetic songs.
I'm up for a musical episode. I don't fear the musicals, so.
Well, there's a couple of shots.
It'd be Murray Gold and probably Neil Hannon writing the lyrics. That's what tends to happen with the Doctor Who.
It happened once. I'd be
twice.
Chuffed.
Neil Hannon's done two songs. I don't know if they both appeared on screen.
Oh, did he? I thought it was just one.
There were two. There was Song for 10, and then this Love one.
Or was that at the same time or since?
I think no, it was at the same time. It might have been like an A side and a B side of a possible single that wasn't,
It never happened.
No.
Or something. Yeah, it would be. But see, that's nearly 20 years ago now, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I would love to see Neil Hannon back doing a Beatles pastiche or something. That would be terrific. But I don't see it really. But would be nice. Is there anything else to talk about? Moffat, I suppose we didn't talk about. On the episode that I did with John, we talked about, because this was immediately after the Moffat news was it was before the Moffat news was announced, but after the Radio Times splashed a story about him doing the Christmas special. And the thing that I suggested then was that if they were talking about a Christmas special that was to be filmed, then they were talking about the one that was going to be broadcast in 2025, Christmas 2025. But given something that Stephen Moffat said, it seems no, they are talking about this year's Christmas special 2024, because Moffat gave the titles away.
Right. Okay.
Moffat did this cute thing, the kind of thing that he does, where he gave away the title for his episode 3, and the title for the Boom is the title for episode 3. I'm assuming it's episode 3. And the title for the Christmas special, because it's already been, so this Christmas special was made a few months ago, and they announced an actor who was appearing as a character, and they gave the character's name, and the character, I can't remember the actor, somebody from no, oh, I should know. Anyway, the character she's playing is called Joy, and and basically I can't remember what he said, but Stephen Moffat said, "I'm back, boom, joy to the world," or something like that.
Right.
And Joy to the World, of course, is a line from A Christmas Carol. So if A Christmas Carol has got a character in it called Joy, and Stephen Moffat's talking about it in the context of having released the name of the episode Boom immediately before, then it stands to reason that the Christmas special is called Joy to the World.
Yeah.
So this year's Christmas special, therefore, is Joy to the World by Stephen Moffat.
And Boom is the Hitchcock one, Hitchcock style. Or Hitchcock. So Hitchcock is the word he's sort of used, or
is it
used? Yeah.
So I didn't know that.
So I think the director, or they asked what the tone was for this Moffat episode, and Moffat said Hitchcock, which makes sense. I mean, with that kind of tension.
Yeah, it's so there is a shot from it in the trailer. There's probably several, but there's one in particular where you've got like a crater.
Yeah.
And in the crater is this sort of luminescent lit green disc thing. And the Doctor's got 1 foot on that. And that is like a landmine sort of thing, a bomb of some kind. So the Doctor spends the entire episode stuck on the bomb. And Millie Gibson's got to do the episode for him. A bit like Flatline, where the Doctor's stuck in the TARDIS. Here, the Doctor's stuck on the bomb. Millie Gibson's doing the episode. In the front of this, you've got smoke and stuff going off. It's like a battle zone or something.
Right.
And she's firing a gun with the Doctor standing behind her with his foot on this mine.
Okay.
I suspect we saw a behind-the-scenes photograph a while ago of a studio set, massive studio set, that looked like a sort of alien planet surface or something like that. I wonder if that was it, because this looks like it probably mostly takes place in this giant set of this crater.
Right. Okay. And that makes sense with the Hitchcock being focusing on as long as you can, knowing that there's a bomb about to go off, and the audience knows there's a bomb about to go off, blah, blah, blah.
So less about the sort of it being a sort of Hitchcocky whodunity type thing, but more like it being a Hitchcocky suspense because the character's stuck. More like, I guess, Rope in a way, because Rope or Rear Window are ones where you've got people stuck in a situation, isn't it? And you draw the tension out of the situation, right?
Sure. Yeah. Lifeboat.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Any more? I don't know if there is really an awful lot more to talk about. I think we've basically said all the things we know. We're probably going to have to come back in a couple of days anyway with more news. They've said there's going to be more news next week, haven't they? I think.
Possibly. I'm kind of riding the wave of what they're sending out. I mean, there's no kind of.
I think we've got to the point now where it's going to be like a piece of news each week to try and keep it in the public consciousness.
Yeah.
I still don't understand. I know people go on about this, but
where are they with filming at the moment? Because
they're midway through the second series, I think.
So presumably they'll trickle information out about filming when they go out on location if they have to.
Well, they're not, are they?
If there are Cybermen or Daleks and they go out on location, then they'll have to mention them at some point because everybody will take a photograph. But they're doing a lot in studio.
Well, there's a new companion been out on location, and they've not told us about that. So no, apparently.
Yeah.
Because Millie Gibson is kind of it sounds like she's coming back.
Right.
But it sounds like this series was her story. So she's a one series companion, really. I mean, if like I say, the end of the series ties up the Church on Ruby Road and the Toymaker together in a sort of time paradox butterfly effect final episode sort of thing, not the kind of thing that you can really see Russell T Davies writing. But then he did all the parallel world stuff in series 2 of the Tennant's first series, David Tennant's first series. He did all that then. So I guess if he does this, the same way he did that. It'd be less about the sci-fi of it than it will be about how it affects the characters.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I wonder if that's what he's doing. He's doing what he did for Rose in series 2, where you have all the various factions of her family come together through the sci-fi. I wonder if Rose is getting the same story this year, where it's all about her family via the sci-fi.
Yeah.
So that's what it looks to me like it's going to be. But anyway, we've done more than the 15 minutes we said. We've done more than half an hour, haven't we? We're terrible.
Well, yeah.
Right, we'll be back to do more news, I guess, next week or whenever it is we need to. Until then, I was JR.
I was Matt.
And we will speak again soon.